All right, get ready to dive deep into ancient Egypt. We're tackling a captivating figure, Sekhmet, this lioness-headed goddess, shrouded in mystery and power.
Yeah.
We want to understand her history, her roles,
Mm-hmm.
and even if she's considered real, an actual entity, or just a myth.
One of the fascinating things about Sekhmet is that she's not just one-dimensional. She embodies this duality. I think you'll find it really interesting.
Duality, huh? Okay, you've piqued my interest. Let's start with the basics. What did she look like, and what does that tell us about her?
Okay, so picture this. A woman's body, but with the head of a lioness, often crowned with this blazing solar disk and then this rearing cobra called a uraeus. Not someone you want to meet in a dark alley.
No, definitely intimidating. I see where the power aspect comes in. But what about this duality you mentioned?
Well, the lioness imagery, right, it's not just about ferocity. Lionesses are also fierce protectors of their pride. So this kind of hints at Sekhmet's role as a guardian deity, a force to be reckoned with by anyone who threatens order, balance.
So she's not just a destroyer, but a protector too. Okay, that makes her even more intriguing. What about this solar disk, this cobra? What do those symbolize?
Those symbols are key to understanding her in the Egyptian pantheon. The solar disk links her directly to the sun god Re, who is often depicted as her father, and then the uraeus, that represents royalty and divine authority. And combined, they suggest this being of immense power, closely connected to the source of life itself.
Interesting. That title, Eye of Re, that comes up a lot in the sources you send over.
You're right.
Is she like a separate goddess or more an extension of Re's power? Seemed a little unclear.
That's one of the big debates among scholars, right?
Wait.
Some ancient texts depict her as Re's daughter, acting as his protector and enforcer, almost like this, warrior princess. But other texts suggest she may even be his wife, adding another layer to their relationship.
Wow, wife-daughter. That's a pretty big difference. It makes you wonder if they were trying to define her role or if these different stories reflect how the beliefs about her evolved over time.
It's fascinating to consider, isn't it?
It is.
Ancient Egyptian mythology wasn't like this fixed system, right?
Yeah.
The stories and relationships between the gods changed and adapted over centuries.
So maybe it's not about finding the right answer, but appreciating the different interpretations that existed. Okay, let's talk about her powers. The sources mention both destruction and healing. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. So this is where Sekhmet's duality really becomes even more pronounced. She's associated with war, plagues, and the scorching heat of the sun, capable of bringing about chaos and destruction.
Wow, that's some serious power. But how does healing fit into all of this?
Well, the ancient Egyptians believed that destruction often paves the way for renewal, and healing, too, can be a forceful process, purging illness and negativity.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to break something to fix it. So in a way, destruction and healing are two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And that reflects a core belief in ancient Egyptian thought, the power of balance.
Okay.
They saw destruction and creation as intertwined forces that are essential for maintaining cosmic order.
Okay, I'm starting to see how complex and multi-layered she is. This isn't just about a lion-headed goddess wreaking havoc. There's a deeper philosophical understanding at play here. Now, I'm really curious about these hundreds of Sekhmet statues that have been found. They seem to be a big clue to her significance.
You're right. They weren't just scattered randomly, right? Many were concentrated in specific temples, particularly the Temple of Amenhotep III in Luxor and the Temple of Mut at Karnak.
So why so many statues? And why in those particular locations? There's got to be a story there. What can you tell us about those temples?
Well, the Temple of Amenhotep III was his massive funerary complex. It was intended to honor him in the afterlife, and he seemed to have a particular devotion to Sekhmet, possibly viewing her as a powerful protector for his journey through the underworld. Hundreds of her statues lined this complex as a testament to his reverence, and perhaps a way to appease this powerful goddess.
It makes sense. If you're facing the afterlife, you definitely want a fierce lion goddess on your side. But what about the Temple of Mut? She's a different goddess altogether, isn't she?
That's right. Mut was associated with motherhood and protection, often depicted as a vulture goddess. Now here's where it gets interesting. Some of those Sekhmet statues from Amenhotep's temple were later moved to Mut's temple.
Hold on. They physically moved these massive statues between temples. That's incredible. Why would they do that?
It suggests some pretty significant shifts in religious practices and beliefs over time. Perhaps there was a change in the understanding of Sekhmet's role or a merging of her attributes with those of Mut.
It's like they were rewriting her story, adapting her to fit the changing times and beliefs.
Exactly. Ancient Egyptian religion wasn't static, right? It was constantly evolving and absorbing new ideas, reflecting the changing dynamics of their society.
Right.
And each of those statues is like a piece of a puzzle, offering clues to how beliefs and practices changed over centuries.
So we've got a powerful, multifaceted goddess with a history that's intertwined with the evolution of Egyptian religion. It's like peeling back layers of an onion.
Right.
With every layer, we get a more nuanced, more complex understanding of Sekhmet. But I have to ask, with all this talk of her power, was she considered real, or was she more of a symbolic figure?
That's the question.
What do the sources say about that?
Well, that's a question that continues to intrigue scholars and enthusiasts alike. I mean, for the ancient Egyptians, the line between the physical and the spiritual worlds was often blurred, right? Their gods were woven into the fabric of their daily lives, influencing everything, from the rising of the sun to personal matters of health and fortune.
So it wasn't necessarily about whether she physically existed in the way we might understand it today.
Right.
It was more about her presence, her power in their lives.
Precisely. And that power is evident in the sheer volume and diversity of ways she's depicted, from the colossal statues in grand temples to small personal amulets worn for protection.
Okay.
Sekhmet's presence could be felt at every level of society.
Speaking of those amulets, you mentioned one in particular from the Art Institute of Chicago. What can we learn from that piece?
That amulet provides a fascinating glimpse into the personal side of Sekhmet worship. It's made of faience.
Okay. A type of glazed ceramic. And it depicts Sekhmet in her classic, hybrid form. Lioness head, woman's body. Imagine carrying that close as this reminder of her protective power.
So even in their daily lives, people were seeking her protection.
Right.
Makes you wonder what kind of dangers they were hoping to ward off.
Exactly. The ancient Egyptians, they faced all these threats. Disease, famine, wild animals,
Right.
even malevolent spirits. And they believed that Sekhmet, with her fierce nature and connection to healing, could help them navigate those dangers.
It speaks to the very real fear they must have felt.
Yeah.
And their need to find some sense of control in a world that often felt unpredictable.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that for them, religion wasn't just about abstract beliefs or grand ceremonies. It was about finding ways to cope with those challenges of daily life.
Okay, so we've seen how Sekhmet was worshipped in both grand and personal ways. But I'm curious, those inscriptions on the statues you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
the ones that form this litany in stone.
What can they tell us about how the ancient Egyptians viewed her?
So those inscriptions are fascinating. They feature a variety of epithets, names, and descriptions for Sekhmet. Some highlight her ferocity, calling her the powerful one or the Lady of Slaughter.
Yikes, that's intense. But were those the only kind of names they used?
Oh no, not at all. Others emphasize her healing powers, referring to her as the Lady of Life, or she who protects from pestilence. It's that reminder, again, that duality, that destructive force that can also bring about renewal.
It's almost like they were trying to capture all these different facets of her being,
Yeah,
acknowledging both the terrifying and the benevolent aspects of her nature.
exactly. And the sheer number of these epithets is incredible. Some scholars believe there might be as many as 365 unique epithets, one for each day of the year.
Wow, that's like a year-long celebration of her multifaceted power.
Right.
What was the purpose of that?
Well, it's still debated. But some scholars suggest it was a way to appease Sekhmet, acknowledge her many, many natures. And like the pharaoh's desire to control her power, imagine you've got this powerful, potentially volatile goddess. You want to make sure you're covering all your bases, honoring every aspect of her being.
Makes sense. Like they were hedging their bets.
Right.
Saying, hey, Sekhmet, no matter what form you're taking today, we recognize you and we honor you.
Exactly. And it speaks to the profound respect and perhaps even a healthy dose of fear that the ancient Egyptians had for this powerful goddess.
I'm starting to see why she's captivated people for centuries. It's not just about a lion-headed goddess. It's this complex interplay of power, duality, and the human desire to understand and appease forces that are beyond our control.
You hit the nail on the head, and that brings us back to the question you raised earlier.
Okay.
Was she considered real? For the ancient Egyptians, the gods were a very real presence in their lives. And Sekhmet was no exception. They saw her power manifest in the natural world, in times of war and peace, and in matters of personal health and well-being.
Yeah, it's a different way of looking at the world that we might have today.
Right.
But it's fascinating to try and understand Their perspective
It is.
makes those statues and amulets even more meaningful, right? They weren't just art objects.
Right.
They were tangible representations of a power they believed was very real,
Yeah,
very present in their lives.
absolutely. And speaking of those statues, remember how we said some of them were moved between temples?
Right. We talked about the possibility of changing beliefs, changing practices.
Yeah.
But what else might those movements tell us about Sekhmet, her place in Egyptian society?
Well, think about the logistics involved in moving these massive statues. It would have been a huge undertaking, requiring significant resources and manpower. So this suggests that the decision to move them, it wasn't taken lightly. It involved complex, political, religious motivations.
So it wasn't just a matter of saying, hey, let's move this statue over there.
Mm-hmm.
It was a statement, a display of power and authority.
Yeah.
But whose power are we talking about? The pharaohs or the priests? Or was it seen as Sekhmet's power somehow influencing these decisions?
It's likely all those factors, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the pharaoh held immense power, both political and religious, and he would have had the authority to order the movement of such important objects.
Sure.
But he also operated within this complex religious system,
Yeah.
overseen by powerful priests who interpreted the will of the gods.
So it's this dance between human agency and divine influence. These massive Sekhmet statues become pawns in this larger game of power and belief. It's mind-boggling to think about, but I have to admit, I'm still a little confused about her relationship with Re.
Yeah.
We've talked about her being depicted as both his daughter and his wife.
Yeah.
How do we reconcile those seemingly contradictory roles?
It's a puzzle. And it's tempting to try and fit those roles into neat, easily defined boxes.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that ancient Egyptian mythology wasn't always concerned with strict logic or consistency.
Right.
They were comfortable with this ambiguity, with this paradox,
Yeah.
especially when it came to their deities.
So it's not about choosing one or the other, but understanding that both perspectives existed, and both, in a way, contributed to the larger picture of who Sekhmet was.
Exactly. And that multifaceted nature is what makes her so enduringly fascinating, right? She defies easy categorization, challenging us to think beyond our usual assumptions about gods and goddesses. Now, remember those statues in the Vatican museums? They offer another intriguing layer to the story.
Oh, right. We mentioned them earlier, but we didn't really delve into their significance. Why are they so important? What can we learn from them?
Well, these statues, originally from the Temple of Mut at Karnak, right, they ended up in the Vatican museums through a series of historical events. And their presence in a collection so far removed from their original context, it's really a testament to the power of ancient Egyptian art. Artifacts, they continue to captivate and intrigue people, across cultures, across centuries.
And studying them, no matter where they are, helps us piece together a more complete understanding of ancient Egyptian beliefs, practices. It's like a global collaboration across time and space.
Absolutely. And there's this recent project that's particularly exciting. Have you heard of the Sekhmet project at the Vatican museums?
No, what's that all about?
So they're using cutting-edge technology, things like 3D modeling and AI, to study the Sekhmet statues.
Wow.
In new ways. Imagine they can analyze the inscriptions, the materials, even like the tiniest details of the craftsmanship to uncover new insights that were previously hidden.
Wow, it's like combining ancient history with modern technology.
Yeah.
To gain a deeper understanding of Sekhmet.
Exactly.
Her significance.
It's a fantastic example of how technology can actually enhance our appreciation and understanding of the past.
I love it.
And what's fascinating is that even with all of our modern tools and knowledge, right, we're still uncovering new layers of meaning and complexity in these ancient objects.
Like Sekhmet herself is revealing her secrets to us, piece by piece, across millennia. I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface of what there is to learn about her.
One of the things that strikes me about Sekhmet is that even though she's this ancient Egyptian goddess, her story resonates with very human themes.
Oh, absolutely. I've been thinking about that as we've been talking.
Okay.
What do you think those themes are, and why do they still speak to us today?
Well, for me, it's that idea of duality, that we all have within us the capacity for both creation and destruction, for anger and compassion, for healing and hurting. Sekhmet embodies those contradictions in such a powerful way.
It's like she's a reflection of the human experience itself, with all its, messiness.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the reasons why she continues to fascinate us. She challenges us to confront those darker aspects of ourselves, right? To acknowledge that they're part of what makes us human.
She's a reminder that we can't have light without shadow. Sometimes destruction is necessary for growth,
Yeah,
and that even the most fearsome forces can also be sources of healing and protection.
beautifully said. And I think those are lessons that are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean? We've uncovered so much about Sekhmet. Her history, her roles, her powers, the way she was worshipped, the mystery surrounding her. What's the takeaway?
I think the takeaway is that Sekhmet is more than just this fierce, lion-headed goddess. She's a complex and multifaceted figure who embodies the very essence of duality,
Okay.
the destructive and creative forces that shape our world and ourselves.
She challenges us to look beyond simple explanations. Embrace that ambiguity, that paradox that often lies at the heart of existence.
And she reminds us that even in the face of fear, in the face of uncertainty, there's always that possibility of healing, of renewal, and that enduring power of belief.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
And I think it's a perfect note to end on for this deep dive.
Indeed. I hope this has sparked your curiosity, dear listener, and inspired you to explore the mysteries of Sekhmet
Yes.
and that rich tapestry of ancient Egyptian mythology.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I can't help but wonder, how would Sekhmet fit into our modern world? What do you think?
Oh, that's a fascinating question to consider. It really is. Imagine this powerful goddess with all her, complexities and dualities suddenly in our modern world. What roles would she play? How would we even perceive her? Would we revere her, fear her, or, maybe even both?
It's hard to say. I think it would depend on who you ask. Some might see her, as a symbol of strength, resilience, this powerful force for change in a world that often feels so chaotic and out of control.
Right.
Others might be intimidated by her, a reminder of, the destructive forces that we're battling all the time.
It's true, and that's what makes it such an interesting thought experiment.
It really is.
It challenges us to think about our own values,
Right.
our own beliefs. What are we most afraid of? What do we value? And how would we respond to a figure who embodies both the light and shadow sides of existence?
It's like holding up a mirror to ourselves, to our, individual and collective psyches.
Absolutely. And maybe, just maybe, by grappling with those questions, by trying to understand a figure like Sekhmet in our modern context, we can gain just a little more insight into ourselves and into the complexities of being human.
Well said.